Okay, so welcome everyone to the Working Group 1 webinar on occupant behavior in sustainable buildings. First of all, my name is Zena Harris and I am with the ISCN Secretariat. I will be the moderator today, and so I'll be behind the scenes. You can type any questions you have in the little chat and I'll try to get back to you. Otherwise, we'll have time for questions at the end. So just quickly, for anyone who is not familiar with the ISCN or has not participated in an ISCN activity, the ISCN currently has about 68 member institutions, and we're a global forum to support leading colleges and universities and corporate campuses in the exchange of information, ideas, and best practices for achieving sustainable campus operations and integrating sustainability in research and teaching. And one of the ways that we support this mission is through working groups. And so Working Group 1 focuses on buildings and sustainability impacts. Working Group 2 focuses on campus-wide planning and target setting. And Working Group 3 focuses on integration of research, teaching, and facilities. And so today we're fortunate to have Working Group 1 co-chairs, Ying and Bart and Meehan, hosting this webinar and sharing case studies from Cornell University and Australian National University, and then discussing any questions that you have. So for just quickly logistics, those participating may want to mute their microphones just so that background noise doesn't interrupt the presentation. And then also, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, we're going to record this and it'll be on the ISCN website. And just for technical purposes, we also have a video that we'd like to play in this, and if for some reason it doesn't work properly, we'll also post that on the ISCN website as well, so everybody will have an opportunity to view it. So with that, I will hand over the controls of the screen to Bart first, I believe, and put this on slideshow so we can view the screen. And then Bart, you should have controls. So go for it.
Thanks very much, Zena. Yes, my computer is telling me I have control. So, well, firstly, welcome to those who have tuned into this webinar, and welcome from Australia. I'm in Canberra, Australia, which is the capital, about 300 kilometres in from the Sydney on the East Coast. Our first webinar, and as the title slide says, it's related to occupant behaviour in sustainable buildings. Now I'm hoping that, yes, that I do have control. So as Zena said, we're co-presenting today, Ying, and she'll introduce herself and her background when she gets to her presentation, and myself. And just so that you have a little bit of background, of my background, these days I'm a research associate and visiting fellow at the Fenner School of Environment and Society at the Australian National University. But prior to that, and prior to my retirement, I had 20 years as the Director of Campus and Facility Services on the Australian National University campus. So consequently, my view and my research is informed by a work-life experience as a practitioner. My role in that facilities plant directorship was to look after buildings, maintenance, campus services, but it was also to set up the campus environmental sustainable program and to start to build and operate buildings that were sustainable in their operation. There was the role, yes. So as Zena said, Ying and I are co-chairs of the working group set up by ISCN. There are 3 working groups, and our working group 1 is charged with looking at the principles Principle 1 of the ISCN Charter. I won't read that through, but you can see the focus there is very much on developing sustainable campus infrastructure. And this is a key thing from our perspective in building a sustainable campus community. So, will be presenting her presentation after mine, and we'll go through those details when I hand over to her. But my presentation is related to occupant paper and whether and does it matter. And I'm going to be looking at that very briefly through the case studies of two buildings on campus. The Fenner School for Environment and Society, the one that I am currently a visiting fellow in, and the Lena Carmel Lodge. Now the Fenner School of Environment is about 3 years old as a building, or coming into its third year of operation, and is a small, relatively small building with about 100 people as occupants, and it is a mix of offices and teaching space. The Lena Carmel Lodge is a student resident, and a very large one, with around 550 residents in a variety or a mix of different types of room designs. Since retiring and moving in as a visiting fellow at Research School, I've been looking at the interaction between building sustainable design and operations and occupant behaviour. And the methodologies I've been looking at, I've been using, have been surveys and interviews, an analysis of the original building design model against the demonstrated actual operation of the buildings, and an analysis of the operational metrics. So what are the actual buildings doing? My main focus and my main interest is, in fact, what impact do people have on the operation of a sustainable operation of a building. We all, I think, here at our respective campuses in our respective organisations, when buildings are designed to be sustainable, when they have leading edge technologies that reduce their energy, reduce their water consumption, improve the overall environmental footprint of those buildings. And there's often a lot of focus on those design elements. But there is less focus, certainly here in Australia, on the impact that the occupants of a building have, regardless of how well designed that building may be. And those two quotes, I think, sum it up. The first from a very good research which emphasises the importance of people. The second from an engineer who worked for me, who consistently said whenever I tried to point out that a building wasn't performing exactly as we had designed it, that it changed the moment we put people in it. That's true, it changed the moment we put people in it. And that's the area that I'm particularly interested in. Why is that the case? So let me start by running a very short video on the Fenner School of, which sort of outlines a little bit of its sustainable design element. And the photo that you can see on the screen there is a shot of the actual Fenner School itself. So let's see this video will work.
Okay. Okay.
Cannot speak.
Yeah.
So
Just one second. Let me pull it up off my screen here. How about that? And then we can hit play.
that's it. Okay, so let's see how we go here.
The Franklin building was designed to achieve six-star standard, which it has now achieved. And the real point was to do strong environmental performance, but also be a really good workplace and one that fitted into the environment that it sat in, and to achieve that in a way that showed that you could do it affordably.
Let's try that. Let me try that again.
The Franklin building was designed to achieve six-star standard, which it has now achieved. And the real point was to do strong environmental performance, but also be a really good workplace and one that fitted into the environment that it sat in, and to achieve that in a way that showed that you could do it affordably. So to be a green building did not have to cost the earth. To achieve six-star certification, you really need to cover off on a lot of areas of environmental performance, both the human use and safety, and fresh air, energy and water efficiency, and particularly important. So, low impact or low energy lighting, but also a solar array that feeds back and produces almost as much energy as the building consumes, and to have full black water and stormwater recycling. So it's a whole range of features, and the use of recycled materials is quite important, and to be able to use materials that are also recyclable. The Franklin building was a collaboration between the ANU, the ACT government and the Commonwealth in terms of funding, and it houses the Fenner School of Environment and Society, which is a research and teaching school, and the ANU's Climate Change Institute, which is a cross-government institute to coordinate work in climate. The aim was to make a building that was good to look at, but actually not just like a work of art, but something that actually related to the landscape. So the colour scheme on the main building actually is taken from the native trees nearby, eucalyptus cantata, and the stormwater management system includes a biodiverse native planted wetland, which links into nearby bushland. And also the brickwork represents research outcomes of the school in remote sensing. So to have a building that looked good, but actually also spoke to the landscape it was in and to the sort of environmental science research that's done here.
Okay. Unfortunately, at least at my end, that video was a little choppy. But as Zena said at the beginning, I think they're going to load the actual video on the ISCN website. So if you wanted to watch it again, probably at a more regulated speed, you can do. But I think it's important to emphasise what the intent of the Fenner School was. And you can see from the presenter in that video, who is actually the director of the school, it was to create an environment for the school that saw a building that operated in a sustainable way. So it was designed and calibrated to operate in a sustainable way. It was also intended to create an environment in which the occupants of that building could be sustainable in their work and academic life, and it was also created to as a living laboratory to allow people to do research on the operation and sustainable operation of that building. The slides that I'm giving you now just sort of highlight some of the elements of the design that were put into the building. And as the presenter, Professor Dovers, mentioned, the actual brickwork here that you can see on the right, or my right, of the photo, is actually brickwork that reflects research from remote sensing done by academics in the school. And interestingly, the intent of that was, in fact, again, to have a visual cue, a visual reference that people could see, almost like a piece of art that would remind people about not only the research of the school, but also the overall importance of environmental sustainability. The surrounding area is, again, the wetland that was mentioned, and again, that was about bringing people out of the building to engage with the environment and to be to again try and reinforce values of sustainability. Now, you might think, given that the community in this school is all environmentalists, you would think that there is a natural predisposition for those people to be sustainable in their behaviour. But as Professor Dovers has mentioned, while at a macro level many of those academics are world leaders in their chosen field of environmental studies, why would you assume somebody who is focused perhaps on you know, indigenous reptile species in northern Australia would necessarily have a fundamental understanding of how the behaviour in their office would affect the environmental footprint of the building. So while you do have a community that is predisposed and has values that at a macro level support the type of things that as a campus and as a school community want to be achieved in terms of being a sustainable community, their behaviour may not necessarily align with those values or those attitudes. And it's quite clear from studies going right back to the 60s that there is often a disconnect between attitude and behaviour. And in my research and in my interviews and indeed in my experience over a number of years working with the university community, there was consistent evidence of that. I rarely met anyone who spoke about not wanting to be environmentally sustainable in the way they behave, but their behaviour was not necessarily consistent with that state today. The Feather School itself is also key on the ANU campus because it is the first building on the ANU campus that was accredited by the Green Building Council of Australia to accrue the 6th Green Star Design and Construction standard. Now, to put that in context for any international participants, that's arguably the same as LEED Platinum. It's the top end, it's international best practice, and of its building type, there are not many 6 Green Star buildings in Australia, not that many, and even fewer in the Australian tertiary sector. And this particular building, as I mentioned before, is quite small in that it's only got 100 people in it, but it was also relatively cheap to build at around about 11 million Australian dollars. So as I move on to, do you have, Zena, do I have control there? I seem to have lost control, Zena, of the...
Okay, try one more time. Okay.
There we go. All right, so let me talk a little bit about the intent. When we built this particular building, the Feather building, our intention was to, although also educate the community inside the building about how it operated and how their activities were affecting that operation. And part of, and I guess one of the key elements of that that strategy was to provide direct feedback and indirect feedback to the building occupants through a range of reports and public display meters that actually showed in real time how energy and water particularly were being used. And just to put that in perspective, the European Environment Agency report suggests that those feedbacks can generate savings of anywhere between, direct feedback anywhere between 5 and 15%. Now, that is quite a wide range, which I think probably highlights the fact that this is not an area that it is easy to quantify and measure. While common sense would tell you that showing someone what their impact in an environmental sense, in an energy use sense, for example, may have an effect on how they consume that energy. In my interviews and in my surveys, there is also clear evidence that even though you gave that information to people, it did not necessarily motivate them to change that behaviour. And I'll come to that when I do a summary of some of the research results later on, why that might be the case. In terms of the actual analysis of the building itself, we, Fenner School, we did modelling on the design in terms of energy use, and what we believed each of the component elements of, or major elements of the energy or the building operations would consume. As you can see on the left-hand side in the models, it was done on Occupy to be clear. The modelling showed for lighting, mechanical services and cooling, the megawatt hour estimated consumption. The research that has been done recently with the building occupied shows the actual consumption substantially higher. In the case of lighting, up to twice as much as originally modelled. Similarly for mechanical services and cooling, around about 3 times as much. We didn't model because we couldn't. We were doing unoccupied modelling, the plug-in load, but you can see there how significant the plug-in load is, and I think that's the key thing to have a look at when we're talking about behaviour in a building. That plug-in load is what people choose to hang off the building's energy systems. So that's not only computers, but it's all the additional peripheral systems that they put into place. I think it's key to look at that and say, well, that is a very significant component of the operations of the building, and reinforces how important people's behaviour and choice to consume energy is. So I undertook surveys in the Fenner building over a period of 12 months. I also undertook a number of key interviews with a relatively broad group of people, students, academics, administrators in the building. And while my research is still being compiled and put together, the 5 points that I've put up on the screen there, I think, summarises some of the issues I found in in discussing with people why they consumed energy, what effect these things had on their ability to improve their environmental behaviour, or to be more sustainable in their behaviour. And the first of those, highlighted by a number of the staff, was organisational barriers to change. And the three things that came up in the interviews and some of the survey questions there were policy, process and workload. Now, policy reflected either a lack of understanding of the policy, and a key element of that, for example, was I asked the question about whether the school had a policy that allowed you to turn your computers off overnight. And roughly 50% of the respondents said, no, it doesn't have a policy. It does allow, sorry, the school does allow you to have turn the computers off overnight. And around 50% said no, the policy is you're not allowed to. So there was a clear misunderstanding about a simple policy like that. Then there were other policies related to, example, things like purchasing and purchasing more sustainable items, reducing waste, and administrators, for example, didn't necessarily understand that the policies of the university allowed them to choose a more sustainable product, even if it was more expensive than a less sustainable product. The value for money wasn't a purely dollar issue, it was a holistic an evaluation. So there was a sense of not understanding that. And there was also, in a policy sense, a disconnect between some of the stated values of the university as an organisation and the aims to be more sustainable in behaviour. So some of the policies actually acted against trying to be more sustainable in behaviour in terms of, for example, alternative transport, the perception of the types of clothes that you could wear given the weather. So in other words, a belief amongst people that they have to wear much more formal dress rather than dressing for the climate. There hadn't been any audit of those disconnects and any attempt to align them and educate people on them. Similarly, processes fall into the same category. There were processes, particularly in the purchase, in the academic scheduling, and a whole series of things that acted counter to allowing people to be more sustainable in their behaviour, in their transport behaviour, in a whole series of things. And the last one, I think, probably is familiar to colleagues all around the world, and that's workload. A lot of people said that the reason they didn't do something, be more sustainable, was that simply their workloads didn't allow them to be more sustainable. Now, it's easy to dismiss that and say it's an excuse, but the reality is people are busy. They have busy family lives and busy professional lives, and when they're preoccupied with those issues, it's very hard to get a universal focus in a community on sustainability. And I'll give an example of something as simple, a very simple example rather, of how workloads can affect behaviour. Originally, recycling bins, paper recycling bins, were in one of our schools was at the end of a corridor, and people got out of their offices and could put paper and other recyclable materials in the recycle bin at the end of the corridor. And when we actually assessed what recyclable waste was going into the landfill, stream as opposed to the recycle stream, we noticed there was still quite a lot of recyclable waste going to landfill, and we analysed why that was, and we found that around about the first 5 offices closest to the recycling bin in that corridor, people would get up and put the waste in the recycling bin. The people who were further down the corridor didn't. And it was a simple act of saying they didn't have time to get up, break from whatever they might be doing, whether it's writing, whether it's looking at assignments, whatever it might be. That few seconds extra to get up and do it became a burden because of their workloads. So it affected their behaviour. The second issue that came up in interviews was generational differences. And we found this, that going in, for example, into the public areas in the Fenner building in summer and indeed in winter, where those public areas were where a lot of students worked, they were much hotter. They didn't turn on the air conditioning, or they minimised the use of it. They dressed appropriately. They either dressed coolly in summer or warm in winter. And when I asked them about this particular issue, it was that there was that from their perspective, they thought it was quite normal for them just simply to dress in t-shirt and shorts, for example, in summer to come in. They didn't have a problem with doing that. And that was consistent in a number of their stated values. The younger the person in this group, the more active their behaviour was in trying to reduce their individual footprint, their environmental footprint. Again, we are trying to overgeneralise. The staff, the older generation, the people who were in an older group, my group to a certain degree, were much more likely to dress more formally and were more likely to use, for example, air conditioning to cool or heat an office area rather than dress for the climate. So you would see people on a very cold day wearing shirt and light pants rather than jumper and so on. But as a consequence of wearing the light clothing, they had to have the heating up much higher. The other aspect of the research showed, and this goes back to the issue of feedback, people getting feedback about performance of the building was of interest to people, but it didn't relate to anything. There had been no targets set so that people could actually measure the performance of the building from an environmental perspective against what was being achieved. And that seemed to be a fairly key thing, because people, a lot of the people I spoke to and interviewed seemed to then transfer responsibility for environmental performance to the people who operated the building, the managers, the facilities managers. They didn't relate the performance to anything they did. They said it should be more efficient because there were no individual or collective targets for the community. Similarly, a number of respondents spoke about the importance of technology, and it was clear in some of those statements there was a level of dependence upon that technology. And a classic example of this was the lighting systems, which are automated to turn off after a certain period of time of inactivity. When I asked people would they turn off lights, around about 60% of respondents said yes, but we don't have to because the building turns it off. Now, that is true, it does, but on the other hand, there was an evident there that there was increasing dependence on the building systems to act or to make the building behave sustainably, and there was a sense of automating out occupant behaviour. Now, based on my experience over some 20 years in this field, time and time again I've seen an increasing level of automation in buildings, and don't get me wrong, I think it's critical that you have sophisticated systems to make buildings operate sustainably. But I've also seen that as the level of automation increases, there is a real sense of those systems automating out the occupant of buildings, and there's almost a sense of disassociation that again people think that the building is operating sustainably, so what they do doesn't matter, because the building should actually correct anything they do. The building should be doing it. And the fifth point I would make here is the poor understanding of the sustainability design and operations. And again, this is not the occupant's fault. I think it's a case of there was a real opportunity to spend more time educating this community, and again, because of workloads, because of a whole range of things, that level of education of people hasn't been as developed as it could be. As a consequence, there is an awful lot of misunderstanding about how the building operates and the systems operate, and how the occupant interact with that as those building systems. There's also a lot of misunderstandings and myths about how people consume energy. That there's still the amongst many people the old myth that turning off and turning on a monitor, for example, consumes more energy than leaving it on. Well, classically, that's not the case. Similarly, people don't realise that even when systems are on, are turned off, if they're still plugged in, they're still drawing power. So there are things like that could better inform people. The way the buildings are set up for their air conditioning systems, people don't use those effectively. They leave windows open, which actually then mean the air conditioning systems actually have to work much harder. And I think the most the key thing that comes out, and this is an area where I'm going to try and do more researching, it was what appears to be, at least amongst some people, a rebound effect. This building actually has a large array of photovoltaic solar cells on its roof, and a very large percentage of the user operation is powered by that renewable energy source. There seems to be amongst some people at least a perception that then means that how they consume energy is not that important because it is a renewable energy source that they are consuming. There are, again, the research in this area is very light overall. There's very, very, very limited research at an organisational level on rebound effect. But as I walk around the building, for example, I see nearly every office now having 2 monitors on their desks. Admittedly, those monitors are low energy monitors compared to earlier model monitors, but people still use those 2 monitors. A lot of desks have additional heaters under the desk. They have a lot of other peripheral items. And again, people don't necessarily understand that they're still consuming energy, and when some are questioned, they say, but that energy is a green energy. So this is an area that I think reflects on behaviour, and it's one that from a corporate perspective we need to be looking at, whether or not in fact people's energy consumption, in fact their behaviour is actually modified rather than by replacing the energy with a more sustainable form of energy, and they simply continue to consume at the same levels or even higher. So let me now go on to the Lena Carmel building. This is an area I've just started to do research on, and as I mentioned before, the Lena Carmel building is a very large student residence. Fenner is offices and teaching tutorial space. This is accommodation for 550 students, mostly undergraduates, some postgraduate. It's also a very expensive building by comparison, around about 8 times more expensive than the Fenner building, getting up to around $80 to $90 million Australian to build. So it is a expensive, high quality building, and I would argue certainly the most sustainable designed and operated residential college in Australia, and I would think it's one of the most sustainable residential colleges in the world. You can see here the various, on this slide, the various basic elements of sustainability that have been put in there, but there's obviously orientation, its location close to public transport hubs, and a whole range of other things made this a very sustainably operated building. But what I think is key from this perspective is when this building was built, and again going back to my earlier point about the generational differences, this is a community where the average age is in the low 20s, and the key element of this decision of this building was to actually not only have all these design elements in the building, these very sophisticated infrastructure design and plant and equipment systems, but also to provide feedback to the residents and try and build a community that can take that information and can take the design around it, interact with it, and become much more sustainable in the way they behave. And you can see there on this slide, throughout the building you have quite detailed public meters, if you like, that give real-time information about the consumption of energy, the consumption of water, waste, and so on to the community. And you can see they're located in key areas where students gather throughout the building, so that they're very much in the face of people, and they can also become a point of discussion. The other, taking that information and taking the way the building is designed, there is an awful lot of opportunity, and indeed the residential communities interact and build their own personal knowledge of sustainability and how the building is operating and how they are affecting it. There are various groups within the building. All of the areas they meet have access to fresh air, ventilation, fresh air, natural light. There's lots of things that reinforce the environmental and sustainable design values of the building, and act, if you like, as a cue to promoting individual and group behaviour. there's also very much formal elements of education. The community itself and the management of the residential hall have put education programs into place for the residents. So when new residents arrive, there are various orientation programs, and throughout the years of their residencies there are also other programs, things on organic food, on energy consumption, on the photovoltaic solar cells that are providing power to the building. So all of those are workshops that are operated for the community. Just on the and to reinforce the interactive nature of this, just to talk about the organic food element, on the rooftop there is quite a large rooftop garden, and part of that garden has been dedicated to allow the residents to grow vegetables. They can actually cook their in their rooms. Those rooms are set up for them to actually provide their own catering, so they can actually cook their own vegetables or grow their own vegetables for their own use in their rooms. And they run courses on organic food on the rooftop, and they have the community interacting with that, so they learn the values of this. In the bottom level of the residential lodge, there is commercial space, and one of the commercial areas is a food cooperative which allows organic farmers from around the region to sell their product, and they also interact with the students as well. So you've got this, again, this interaction with the community, with the building, with the operation of the building, with the activity of the building, which constantly reinforces the importance of the individual rather than necessarily the sophistication of the automated systems. As I mentioned before, the community education and engagement is important. Just to summarise or to finish up on that, the students have themselves created a lot of fun initiatives which have been supported by the management of the hall, and they include taking those data that you see on these public displays and running competitions between floors, between wings of the residents, see who has the lowest environmental footprint. The winners have things like pizza parties and organic pizzas from the organic food cooperative, and a whole range of things, but that are funded by the building management. And so you get a lot of engagement, you get a lot of this. I mean, we're talking about a quite young demographic, and they enjoy this sort of activity, they enjoy the competition between the floors, and we see a lot of great activity between these groups, and it actually helps again to reinforce their engagement with the building's sustainable performance. And the last thing I think that was neat, I think, to point out in terms of trying to look at both the demographic and also the way data is represented. Even with older demographics, I found that words like megawatt hour, gigalitre and so on, for people like me who spent their life in facilities management, they're fine. But when you go in and talk with people about megawatt hours or even tons of emissions, they glaze over. Sometimes demonstrating the impact of your behaviour in some fun and easy to understand way actually has a much better effect. And in the case of Lena Carmel building, they have, because of the height of the building, there are elevators in the building, but we try to encourage the residents not to use the elevators. They're young and they're fit, so let's walk the central staircase, which is quite beautifully designed actually to also transmit light into the building as well as to help with the fresh air ventilation, but to actually use a central staircase. And as I note there, and as I've pointed out on the thing, the way we represent the people using the staircase is how many times the residents have climbed Mount Everest. I think the last time I checked, a few weeks ago, they'd climbed Mount Everest 10 times to date since it had been in operation. So we actually monitor the use of the stairs, and people use them, and they use them because they want to be part of this this idea, this culture, if you like, of the community of climbing Mount Everest within their own building. So I'm going to finish up there by saying that while I'm still doing research on Lena Carmel, the anecdotal evidence there is that the Lena Carmel building was not only very well designed and uses an awful lot of systems and design elements that make it operationally sustainable, which is absolutely critical in a building, but it also there was also a decision to make the community engaged with the operation of the building, to educate them, to engage them, and to continue that engagement, to give them feedback, but also to show them how their behaviour impacts on the building, and to continually foster a set of values that creates a more sustainable individual behaviour. That has not been as successful nor as comprehensive to date in the Fenner building, and again for a lot of different reasons, partly because of the nature of operations in that building, because of the workloads, but also I think because there wasn't enough investment at the beginning when the building was open in trying to put together, from a university perspective, the types of programs that would emphasise the importance of individual behaviour. And with that, I'll finish and hand over to Ying.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me give you control, Ying, and you may advance the slides when you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Zina. Thanks, Bart. This is a really interesting presentation, and I think the case represent a holistic understanding of sustainable building. I think you were talking about not only just energy conservation, resources, but also healthy living, working behavior, and also sort of the connection with the community. So what I'll be doing is I'll share some of the things that we do at Cornell, and I think I'll be sort of echoing some of the remarks Bart said just now. So before that, I'll give you a little bit information about my background. So my name is Ying Hua, H-U-A. I'm an assistant professor at Cornell University. I'm in the Department of Design and Environmental Analysis in the College of Human Ecology. And I'm from an architecture background. My research and teaching activities basically focus on what I call the human dimensions of sustainable buildings. Basically I'm looking at building performance from building users' perspective, and also the effectiveness of strategies for stakeholder engagement in sustainable building practice. At Cornell, I'm also co-director of the Buildings Focus Group of our President's Sustainable Campus Committee, and I'm actually working very closely with our director of facility, like people like Bart at his university before he retires, and also our university architect and university engineer. And it actually turned out to be a really rewarding collaboration. On my side, getting access to building data, do my post-occupancy evaluation, but also generating feed the findings, outcomes back to the design and the retrofit processes that the university hopefully is able to making better decisions and improving the performance of our buildings. And so what I'll do today is I'll talk to you about a series of post-occupancy evaluation that I have done in the past about 4 years on our campus buildings. And but instead of introducing findings from individual buildings, I'll be focusing more on the process of the methodology development and testing as a sort of a complementary component to Bart's presentation. So what you are looking at here are all our campus buildings, and most of them are new projects. At Cornell, we have a mandatory policy, any projects over 5 million capital investment, basically that's all the projects, have to pursue at least LEED Silver. But all these buildings are LEED Gold certified, and one on the lower right-hand corner, that's at the platinum level. And also, so as I said, most of these are new, LEED and C buildings, new constructions. But we also start to look at major retrofits. Recently, there have been already 3 major projects major retrofit gut renovation completed, and one of them, which is on the upper right-hand corner, was a sort of a glass box classroom in front of. That's the building for the Department of Natural Resources, which is a major retrofit and is also LEED Gold certified. So my participation in these projects, it actually starts from a requirement by the LEED standards, LEED certification standards, that 1 credit can be assigned for what's called thermal verification, meaning the building owner commit to go back and check how things are going, whether occupants are happy with their indoor environment, mainly the thermal environment, for 1 credit. So at first I was just proposing to the university, how about I help you do that POE, and that will allow the university to the buildings to get 1 credit. And then gradually this grow into multiple building research project using the concept of post-occupancy evaluation, but with a lot of new tools added to it, and also with these the 5 things that listed on this slide reflected in the study. So the same as what Bart has talked about, we are also very much interested in the actual delivered performance, because I believe also it's also common in the U.S. that a lot of attention is still on the design phase and also on adopting state-of-the-art technology, advanced technology. Fewer efforts has been made for a lot of real obstacles, less attention on the actual delivered performance, and therefore a pretty large gap between the modeled performance and the real performance for many cases. And we've been talking about occupant impact actually for quite a long time, but still it is not the way of thinking sort of from really integrating occupant behavior, occupant decision making into the design process. This hasn't been a sort of a common practice yet. So we're focusing on the delivered performance, and we're also interested in, and I say we, basically it's me as a researcher and also the university's system on campus team, interested in building a channel for the information and knowledge generated from previous projects to go into the design and the retrofit processes, sort of creating or rebuild this feedback loop. And interestingly, these POE, because we survey and talk to all kinds of people as building users and building managers in these projects, the study themselves actually become very interesting stakeholder engagement sort of vehicles or means, because actually people who are using the building or managing the building can tell us a lot about what's are working, what's are not, and we have a lot of these kind of interesting stories. And even we actually found even the small custodial team actually can give quite a lot of input about how things are should be cleaned, and comment on some of the material choices. And also, I'm very interested in the interaction between building occupants and the green design, all the green features that put into the building design. Also, we are interested in generating quick impact on practice, not just happy with generating some papers for to publish in journals, but really interested in how to extract what we can from POEs and feed it back to the decision-making process. And in the past 4 or 5 years in these POE studies, we're happy to see that a lot of learning, in-class learning and extra and research opportunities has been created for students. And I'll show you at the end of my slides, I'll show you a couple of examples. So the goals for these POE, of course, just as the same as traditional POE studies, we're interested in understanding the satisfaction level of occupants with various aspects of the building. Mainly, these are thermal conditions, temperature, humidity, air quality, CO2 level, lighting conditions, all of these. And as I mentioned, it does help sign off the LEED credit 7.2 thermal environment verification credit. We're also, as I said, we have questions and observations looking at the interaction between occupants and building systems, and try to understand, because there are some people saying they're not happy with certain aspects of the building environment or the operation of certain building systems. So we have questions about what are the reasons that cause those dissatisfaction. And also, interestingly, this is about 3 years ago, we made a revision of our survey tools, adding sets of questions about trying to understand people's coping behavior. Because in the end, you don't want people to sort of psychologically try to cope with a dissatisfactory environment, because that will have an impact on their productivity and their sort of even have a negative impact on the attraction and retention. Right? But people do have all kinds of different things that they are doing to try to create a comfortable environment for themselves. And then, as I mentioned earlier, besides the intention to understand how our LEED certified buildings work for occupants, we're also very interested in developing a toolkit that can make these kind of evaluation be an ongoing process, not just a one-off research. And also because now Cornell has more and more older buildings that's up to renovation. So we also have a different version of the survey targeting at retrofit projects, which probe into the before and after changes, and also this set of questions about moving experience was actually proposed by the university facilities team, and because they wanted, this is a very complex processes, and they want to make it as smooth as possible, so we added that. And so the actual study, we use multiple tools. We use survey, and the survey actually has version and also a online version that we use depending on different situation. And we also have on the upper right side of the slide, this is what we call an as-is condition logging chart. And because this is a time when the researcher walk into the room, inviting the occupant to participate in the survey. Will document the as-is situation of the room, the lights, about the blinds, about the set point, using those information for later analysis. And we do also collect objective measures, both in forms of spot measurement, like the light levels on work surface, on computer screens, and also continuous data collected by HOBO. This is a temperature, humidity, and light level logging unit, and the CO2 meter. So these two meters help us to log. We usually put it in the space for a week. Also we put them in multiple types of space in the building, open office areas, labs, closed offices, and other amenity or service spaces. So together, the subjective and objective data together help us to identify issues that need to be corrected, can be improved, reasons why there's a gap between the actual performance and the estimated performance, and also help us to based on the diagnosis, figure out suggestions to make to the building and also to the university. Usually we make several different types of suggestions. One type would be made to the facility manager of the building, like easy fixes, things, small changes that to make mainly to the operation processes to save energy, to improve satisfaction. Another set is small scale, small investment, capital investment required changes. And then we have another set of suggestions which is mainly to the university architect and university engineer's office about if later on when we have larger amount of capital available, or if we were to do a similar building like this, what are things actually we can do better. And in terms of the deliverable, I really like the part when Bart talked about how you actually give information, how you communicate to different groups of people to engage them. So for me, I do pay a lot of attention to the forms of deliverables. And this is one sort of standard form of a journal publication at the research level, talking about the methodology, talking about findings in the from those POE studies. But I think what I want to actually spend some time talk about is we also generate graphic reports for facility managers, for the university's facilities office and architect's office to talk to them about the findings using graphic forms and using so this page as an example, we do have in the middle of the page that's a summary of the satisfaction level of the occupants with different aspects of the building indoor environment. And below the box plot, we have explanations of reasons why certain things are not at the level of where they should be, or the design level. And we also communicate to them about the reasons, the frequency of reasons, certain things, issues mentioned by the occupants. And also we give them the plot of the measured CO2, the humidity and temperature level. This chart actually, the building manager found it interesting to compare to his own data, because what we measure in the PV study is at where people are, the occupied space. So the data that the building manager has, many of the data is actually taken from within the system, like at certain location within the duct, or so it's actually when they see those charts, typically presented like this, they actually can give a lot of input, and we found it works way better than just a text-based report to engage them into the co-diagnosis kind of practice. And also, the results stick to them way better than if we only provide a summary report. And so the next slide, we also tried a few different sort of technology. On the right-hand side, you see it's almost look like a color-coded floor plans. This is actually, we're using GIS to plot the satisfaction level onto the different floor, the floor plans. So the goal is actually to identify where the sort of dissatisfaction concentrate. So it actually can help us to identify sort of quickly the problematic zones on the floor. Maybe it's certain things about the facade design that causes problem, or certain things about the system design. And so we're constantly putting in effort to make, to create this more easy to use diagnosis tool, so that this is actually our long-term goal, is for changing the POE from a costly one-off practice to a continuous information collecting processes to inform both the operation and the design decisions. And there are also other forms of dissemination that we're using. The ISCN published a book on sustainable campus. Both Bart and I contributed a chapter. And also because Cornell is right now building our new campus in New York City, and this is also a good time to engage other stakeholders, including the university leadership and financiers into this conversation about sustainable campus. And for Cornell, we established our president, President Gordon, committed to a sustainable campus in 2007, and we have our climate action plan published in between 2008-09 and implemented, and have been documenting the progress. And right now, because things are, we're making significant improvement, and also students actually giving the university pressure of urging the university to commit to a sooner date for campus carbon neutrality. So in our original climate action plan, our commitment is by 2050 reach that neutrality level. But right now, the president is committed to a sooner date in 2035. So right now, the faculty and also the facilities team are working together very hard to put together a climate action acceleration plan. And then in this plan, actually, because we cannot just keep sort of focusing on those low-hanging fruit. That's why occupant engagement, occupant behavior become a lot more visible. And also another thing is existing building become the center of the campus built environment sustainability, because we cannot just keep on building LEED buildings, and a lot of our buildings are at the stage that they're drawing a huge amount of energy from the infrastructure system because of their the bad quality of the envelope system and the aging of the systems. So that's sort of the two of the several highlighted efforts that going to be in this acceleration plan. And for myself, I'm also I'm Chinese, and I'm a member on the task force of Sustainable Campus in China. So I'm also very actively promoting this research and practice in China. This is one example of a symposium I organized earlier in China. And I know there are several universities who are active members of ISCN. And because in China there's it's sort of a different kind of problem. A lot of universities are expanding their campuses and building new campuses, which creates, I mean, this is a good opportunity, but also the scale is also astonishing. So they, on their side, they actually need, would like a lot of, to learn our experiences and also lessons learned to inform their planning and design efforts. So I've been hosting several both professional and scholarly exchange at Cornell for representatives from Chinese universities. And so I know Zina want to leave some time for discussion. So I'll just make some very quick comments on things which Bart mentioned and also sort of showed up in our studies quite frequently. This one thing is about comfort, which is directly related to the building energy demand. And to our team, comfort is a elastic construct, and it can be influenced by many, many things, and whether the occupant has access to the natural environment that actually have an influence on their tolerance for their current indoor environment quality and also their expectations, and whether the occupant has the satisfied level of control over their own individual work living environment also has an impact, direct impact on comfort, and all kinds of adjustment and coping behavior that occupants could have on their the kind of clothes they're wearing, the metabolic level they're at, and whether they're drinking hot and cold beverage, for example, and also things like influence from colleagues, the office culture, and things that happens when people are occupants of a wide, large open space, and also other things like dress code and working day schedule. That these are organizational factors that could have an impact on the comfort level. And what we found is that it is definitely a time for us to define or redefine what is the quality of building, whether, as Bart said, higher or completely automated, is that a high quality indicator? Or does it mean we always wear the same kind of clothes, same level of level, and expecting the same kind of indoor environment regardless of season, right? So these are all questions that need to be asked. It probably would be easier for a university, this kind of environment. It would be a bigger challenge for actually the corporate world, I believe. And also other things like focusing more on effectiveness than simply on efficiency of systems. It's much easier to say than to actually practice, because a lot of the decisions are made based on the theoretical sort of or simulated estimated efficiency of individual systems. But when things put together, things may change. And if we expand our scope of discussing the energy, the effectiveness of energy use, I believe we cannot just looking at the efficiency of individual systems. And there are other things that could also be discussed, because now universities are building sort of this new generation of learning environment. It no longer is about just labs and offices, classrooms, and the dorm buildings. and the new kind of space on campus actually create opportunities for us to look at our original sort of definition of the interface or boundary of indoor-outdoor. And of course, information availability is very, very important. But still, it's a challenge. What kind of information, in what format, and how to give it to the building users. So overall, my team's research effort, collaborating with the university's facility team, is that we want to close the feedback loop. So the findings from the POE can go somewhere. And we want to give the real-time information to occupants in the way that it becomes something facilitating, not just to tell them these are the few things that you should do, but actually enable them to come up with innovative ways to not only contribute to the building's energy consumption conservation, but also help them to create the kind of work environment that they need to perform well. And stakeholder engagement is always an issue. I'm not going to get into the detail of this. Maybe later in our annual conference in Hong Kong next year, we can have more discussion on that. And to my team, it's been a very nice sort of knowledge creation and exchange kind of process, not only at the individual level for researchers, students, and also at the building level, working with the facility managers. And also, I found it could also be a very nice processes for professional development for all kinds of professionals that's involved in the university facility management and design and retrofit processes. And I know these kind of knowledge creation is ongoing for a lot of firms that want to become sort of develop this leading edge in developing sustainable buildings. And then I'll use 2 more minutes to share with you some of our students' engagement in my research, and also one example from my course. So this is actually what a student, he took an independent study with me, looking into the data that my team collect from one lead building, focusing on the visual environment, and experimented with different ways to present the data in order to engage the student community. And there are numerous versions of this poster, and he got feedback and work on improving the ways, both the like as simple as what kind of unit to use, and also what to do to relate it to students' everyday life, everyday decisions. And also another example, this is from my course. We also extensively use our building dashboard, building energy dashboard. A lot of our buildings are online right now, with real-time information available. So the students actually exploring the dashboard as a tool for different stakeholders, for students, for general public, for faculty members who are interested in research on buildings, and for facility managers. And talking about design both different interface and also different flow of information, different way of filter information to make sure that different stakeholders can get useful information relatively easy, so that the dashboard can actually become a platform, a tool that it will continue to use. And this is my last slide. On campus, we start to see more and more student groups taking the initiative. These are some of the examples. These are 4 groups that I'm advising. System Building Connection, Energy Corps at Cornell, and so they all have different emphasis and looking at things on different scale. But nicely related to their own learning experience in their discipline. So I'm actually very exciting to see the kind of energy that they have, and so they are not only sort of well-informed building users, but also start to make contribution from as a professional. So this is actually a nice outcome that wasn't originally in the goals of the POE study, but has been sort of the most fast-growing part is actually this. So I think this concludes my talk, and hopefully we'll still have some time for discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ying and Bart, for your for providing us with this information on your research and examples on your campus. If any of the participants have any questions, please feel free to ask now. If your microphone is muted, you can make sure and unmute that before you try and ask. So I'll open it up if anybody has any questions. If not, I do have a question for you, Ying. Just when you showed the slide of sort of the various floor plans and mapping out where potential areas for improvement need to be, and then giving that to your facilities managers, have you noticed any or did any major operational changes take place relatively quickly after they had seen the data, or how receptive were they?
Okay, so first of all, the main, so I probably could give just a little more piece of information, because sometimes for faculty participation in sustainable campus efforts, I mean, some people would say there isn't enough incentive, because there's just from a sort of pragmatic time allocation point of view. So we're always looking at what's the research value of this, right? So this one is actually proposed by my postdoc researcher, talking about how to visualize the satisfaction data, and also we can also map the measurement data onto the floor plans to help with the diagnosis and evaluation process. So the immediate change when we use things like this is the response from the facility manager, because before usually it's a one direction kind of information flow. We generate the report with some sort of a standard statistics analysis, and then with some conclusions we give it to them, and then that's it. Right? We don't usually get feedback from them. But when we start to use those more graphic way of representing our data, they have more feedback for us, or they ask more questions about what do we mean by this, and why this is different from their data. And this is also what we found. Actually, we're measuring the occupied space where people are. They're measuring what's in the system. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I mean, example like this. So, in terms of changes, I don't have a solid, because this is tried fairly new. We tried this at the beginning of this year, and so I don't think I have information about the exact changes they have made, but there's definitely conversation that's going on about where the quick fixes. Mm-hmm. Let's say at the first step that can be done. So they are looking at some of the scheduling issues. So for the schedule of the system to reflect the occupancy of the space better, because there are some of the zones actually the occupancy rate put into the simulation was not representing the actual occupancy of that part of the space. That actually caused basically you have fewer people there. There's fewer heat generation, and the system might not be working at the level that it should for the people who are there, right? Mm-hmm. So we are in the process of having those conversations, and I'm actually quite optimistic. You know, these are going to lead to adjustment in the operation processes.
Great, great. Are there any other questions? I have one for Bart. Bart, in the Cornell building, because of the age of the occupants, it's a residence hall for students. In the initial design or the modeled energy data, let's say, versus the actual or demonstrated data, is it more in line as compared to the thinner building, or is it still quite different? I'm just curious, given the demographics or the age of the occupants.
Unfortunately, I haven't got those data available at the moment. That's part of the next year's research, to have a look at whether there's some consistency. So all I can do is comment from an observational point of view, okay. And that is that that when the original building was designed, there was quite a significant engagement with the student community, the residential community, to try and design the building very holistically, so that it would suit their needs as residents, it would suit their generational values in relation to sustainability, in relation to security, and so on. And when they came into the building, there were a number of people who took on the role of activists, if you like, from within the residential community, and those activists have continued, and they've passed on the mantle, if you like, as they leave, to others who really work with the management of the building and work with the broader community to actually build understanding and to create sustainable behaviour in that occupant community. That's observational. Mm-hmm. I'll be looking at the hard data. I'm hoping it'll support those observations, but we'll have a look at it. But overall, the building is performing very effectively from a point of view of energy and water consumption. It's certainly within the model, the original modelling. But I need to get more concentrated data on the systems that are in control of the residents and the systems that are in control are upbuilding systems. So I'm more interested in having a look at how those energy and water systems that are actually directly controlled by the residents, how they actually might be matched against some of the initial modelling we've got to see whether or not the culture is one of individual sustainability and community sustainability, rather than simply sophisticated automated systems driving a very efficient building. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we'll have some more of that information by June, by the conference. You can give us an update.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Ying and Bart? If not, I want to thank you both again for putting this together and providing these case studies. It's been fantastic to learn from you and your research. And I will put this on the ISCN website, and if anybody has any questions, Ying and Bart's contact information is on the ISCN website as well. They are both Working Group 1 co-chairs. So with that, I want to thank you both, and we'll look forward to the next time we can all chat. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining.